I spent a lot of time in Malta when I was a kid. It was always a carefree, sunny, happy place.
Viva Malta!
I knew nothing of Malta's dark side. Behind its postcard looks, Malta is at war with organised crime. Drug trafficking, people smuggling and government corruption frequently make headlines. As citizens take to the streets demanding change.
I've come here to Malta to investigate a murder which shook this country to its core. Today is Republic Day in Malta. 47 years ago, it marks the day the country transitioned to independence from Great Britain. You're proud of Malta?
Yes, a lot. I mean, it's been 47 years. Yeah. So, yes, I mean, I'm very, very proud.
I'm very proud and proud of the members of the parliament that worked to have our freedom.
Many have come to revel in the patriotism and the pride. But during the national anthem, a few stay silent and they offer this gesture.
I just saw you guys make this symbol with your fingers during the anthem. What does that mean?
It's the sign we do during our vigils every month after Daphne Caruana Galizia's murder.
Yeah, it's a signal to the general population that all is not well in this country.
The women are talking about the killing of Daphne Caruana Galizia. It's one of Malta's most infamous crimes. The story is the stuff of Shakespearean tragedy, a dark tale of powerful men seemingly corrupted by their own greed. Daphne terrified Malta's ruling class, but who was she and who conspired to kill her?
This is the family house, eh?
Yep, this is where I grew up. It's where my mom worked too, especially in the last years of her life. She worked from home here.
I've come to the village of Bidnia, just north of the capital, to meet Matthew Caruana Galizia. He's one of Daphne's 3 sons.
My mom was really young when I was born. I think she was 20 or 21. And I really felt like we grew up together. She had so much curiosity, she was interested in so many different subjects. She always took the time to listen to people's stories, no matter who they were.
An anti-corruption activist since the age of 18, Matthew's mum would become Malta's most famous journalist.
Kiko kont editur. Kont impjega lil Daphne Caruana Galizia.
Żgur li kont nimpjega, fil-fatt kont intija kuntratt ta' 10 snin u nħallatha ħafna wkoll.
In 1988, Daphne broke the glass ceiling of Maltese journalism, becoming the country's first female columnist and the first to publish in her own name. After nearly 20 years challenging the patriarchy in print, Daphne founded Running Commentary, her own investigative blog.
When something that was outrageous happened in this country and the perpetrators of that injustice were people from the political or business class, they would get away with it. And my mother, tired of seeing this over and over again, she simply couldn't stand it. So she would write about this, she would expose it, she would investigate it.
But with more readers than Malta has citizens, Daphne's powerful voice earned her powerful enemies.
There were also complications because of her work weren't there? I mean, threats made to her and to your family.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I was 9 years old, the front door of our house was set on fire. Our dog, she was kind of laid out in front of the door with her throat slit, like it was covered, the doorstep was covered in blood. Another dog was shot, another one disappeared. So as I grew up, I just sort of realized what was going on.
Would you say she was making enemies?
Yes. People in senior positions in government who are involved in crime with the business class.
So she was making powerful people angry?
Yes. My mother was a serious nuisance to the government. That's why they started calling her the witch of Bidnia, which is where we lived.
Daphne became a target of both sides of politics, but was especially critical of Malta's Labour Party.
This is not journalism, this is character assassination.
The party hit back often, using asset freezes, defamation actions and alleged police intimidation to silence her.
I will not sit at home quietly and not write anything about politics.
She speaks here after her 2013 arrest for blogging on the eve of Malta's national elections.
I have no evidence that I was arrested at the Labour Party's request, but it seems to me the logical conclusion.
Before her murder, Daphne was said to be working on an explosive piece linking then Prime Minister Joseph Muscat to an alleged embezzlement scheme. On October 16, 2017, she wrote her final blog here.
I was sitting right there. That's where I usually sat. She kind of tapped out this last blog post, which is the famous one that's quoted everywhere. There are crooks everywhere you look now, the situation is desperate. And she told me, I'll be back right after this appointment, and when I'm back you can use the car. And it was a few minutes after that I heard this really loud blast. I knew immediately that something bad happened.
Police in Malta have launched a murder investigation into a car bomb attack which killed one of the country's best-known investigative journalists and bloggers.
Half a kilogram of TNT was planted under the driver's seat of Daphne's car and detonated by remote control. She was executed just 100 metres from her home.
This area was on fire.
Right here?
Right here. This was more or less the spot where the bomb went off. And this is the spot where the car ended up. It was right here. People who cared about my mom come here and they leave flowers every now and again. It's difficult to come here.
I think about it every single day. I feel sadness every single day. I mean, my mother was murdered practically in front of my eyes. It's like living a nightmare, really.
Daphne's murder sent shockwaves through Malta. A mother taken from her family. A beloved voice silenced. For those left behind, it was time to seek justice.
My mother was not murdered because someone disliked her face. She was murdered because of her investigative work. And I will never be able to rest until the people who are responsible for it are convicted and are spending the rest of their lives in jail.
We are all shocked, and my role as Prime Minister is to make sure that people are brought to justice.
Within hours of the murder, a manhunt for the killers was underway. Meanwhile, rumours began to spread about who or what got Daphne killed.
If you keep treading on people's foot, maybe she deserves it.
The names of powerful politicians were whispered often. Then, just days after the murder, the government suddenly stopped commenting on the case.
Something massive has happened and nobody's speaking. And the leaders of the country were supposed to be saying, there, we are going to make this right. Don't worry, we've got you. flew away. I censored my language.
These women are members of an activist group called Occupy Justice. In 2017, they believed the government was attempting to sweep Daphne's killing under the rug.
Once you have a parliament that refused to discuss such a subject, we knew that, the tactic was, okay, now we're going to stop speaking about it and, people will forget about it. And this is why we said, this is what exactly we don't want to happen. We need to speak about it until there is justice.
Occupy Justice assembled on the steps of the Prime Minister's palace. At first, just a few women. Then their numbers grew. Soon, it became the biggest female-led protest Malta had ever seen. Daphne becoming the country's first feminist icon.
There were so many women coming from so many different walks of life. There was no women politicians, so this is a women fight.
Can you unpack that a bit for me? I mean, what is the importance behind it being a woman-led movement?
Malta, it's still a very machist country where, men look down on women, and women have a place. It's in the kitchen. They didn't go and kill a man journalist, they killed a woman journalist. So in our view, it was very important that it was seen to be a woman-led movement.
The protests appeared to enrage Malta's political patriarchy, who tried repeatedly to destroy a memorial to Daphne.
They tore down our billboards within hours of them going up. We are constantly told that flowers are illegal and that we are in breach of the law by placing them here.
It's an interesting way of reacting to somebody saying, a woman was killed, can we do something about it?
It was quite an emotional moment because it's not only getting justice for Daphne, but it's getting justice for the country and the truth for the country so that the country can actually learn lessons and apply the drastic change that this country needs.
The women refused to back down.
She started alone. We are not alone.
But the truth wouldn't come easily. Weeks after the assassination, the Maltese police had yet to make a single arrest. It fell to Daphne's family to begin their own investigation, starting where their mum left off.
So in the months leading up to your mother's murder, what was she investigating?
My mum was already investigating suspected corruption in the energy sector in Malta, especially around a company called Electrogas and the people who were shareholders of this company.
For years, Daphne had been investigating a deal involving Malta's only power station. The Prime Minister had promised cleaner, cheaper energy by converting the station from oil to gas. He awarded a huge contract to a company called Electrogas to perform the conversion. But according to Matthew, Daphne believed it was all a scheme to privatise Malta's energy sector and hand millions to the Prime Minister's mates.
Who were the main figures in this Electrogas project?
Jürgen Fenech, Keith Cambry, Konrad Mitzi and Joseph Muscat. Those were the four key players. Jürgen Fenech was really the lead of this project. So nothing happened without him and his connections to government. Keith Cambry was the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff and the Prime Minister's closest friend. The Energy Minister, Konrad Mitzi, he was a facilitator for deals with Jürgen Fenech. And in turn, there was the Prime Minister himself. Joseph Muscat really made a deal with the devil.
Matthew claims a whistleblower contacted Daphne about the energy deal, and that Daphne came to believe the Prime Minister and his allies had accepted bribes from Jürgen Fenech, co-director of Electrogas. In return, Daphne believed they would hand Fenech control of the power station. In 2016, Daphne claimed she'd found proof in the infamous Panama Papers.
My mother uncovered that the Energy Minister, Konrad Mitzi and Keith Cambry, set up secret companies in Panama 5 days after they were elected to power. I mean, that shows black on white that this was their sort of corrupt mission.
These companies were set up when they were already in office, so it is quite obvious that they are used for money laundering purposes. The fruit of corruption, backhanders, kickbacks, drafts, that kind of thing.
But there was one missing piece. Daphne still needed to identify the owner of a third company set to funnel money to the others, the ominously named 17 Black.
17 Black was the counterpart company to these companies set up by Mitzi and Schembri in Panama. And that company was supposed to route payments to these companies. Now, who owned that company? That was what my mother was about to uncover.
Before she was killed.
Yes.
Matthew believed that this was the secret the murderers were trying to protect. Following in Daphne's footsteps, he set out to uncover the owner of 17 Black. And he wasn't alone.
The day Daphne was killed, I heard about it because my nephew called me. And I thought it's unusual, he doesn't normally call. He said something must have happened, and I picked it up and he said, "You've got to come now. There was a bomb in Mum's car." And I just picked up my keys and ran. Daphne's murder changed my life in more ways than one. I'm not just dealing with the death of my sister, I'm dealing with the fact that she was murdered, but I'm also dealing with the murder itself. It would be nice to think that the investigations will go ahead and people will be prosecuted and justice will be served. But that's not going to happen if we do nothing. So from the very first moment, we knew we had to fight back.
We need to look at the report of the public inquiry.
Desperate to unmask the killers, Daphne's family launched a foundation to get the truth.
If there is impunity in Daphne's murder, the ramifications for Malta are enormous because it means that you literally can get away with murder. That's not just dangerous for journalists, it's dangerous for everybody.
The foundation rallied reporters from around the globe to help work the case. One group, calling themselves the Daphne Project, made a damning discovery.
The Daphne Project was a group of 45 journalists who got together and picked up her key investigation, which was into electrogas. They identified the owner of a company called 17 Black. That's a company Daphne had realised that were key to unravelling the entire corruption network.
The Daphne Project uncovered that the owner of 17 Black was Electrogas co-director Haagen. They also found evidence that 17 Black was due to pay millions in suspected bribe money to the Energy Minister and the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff.
When I heard the news, I felt like my mum was sitting next to me. And we were like sort of cheering, you know, like, yes, like it's happening.
For Daphne's family, the revelation was proof to them that the powerful men had motive for murder.
That was what the government was really truly afraid of, that my mother would uncover that Haagen was the owner of this company, and people were literally prepared to murder each other for money.
8 weeks after Daphne's assassination, the case blew wide open. After tracking 2 SIM cards inactive since Daphne's murder, Army and police raided this port near Valletta, arresting 3 men.
The men who were arrested were members of the criminal underworld. One of the 3 men who was arraigned is a man called Vince Muscat. He broke silence when he was in preventive custody and began to talk about what he knew about Daphne's murder.
Muscat claimed that on the day of the assassination, a second man, Alfred Di Giorgio, observed Daphne from a ridge opposite her home. Alfred's DNA was later found on a discarded cigarette at the location. Meanwhile, phone pings and CCTV footage are claimed to have placed a third man, Alfred's brother George, on a boat in Valletta's Grand Harbour. Shortly before 3 p.m, as Daphne drove from her family home, police allege a coded text message was sent from a phone on George's boat to a second device planted under Daphne's car, detonating the bomb.
L-lum naħseb kellna konferma oħra fis-sigħat li għaddew kif kellna konferma fil-ġranet u l-ġimgħat li għaddew li l-istituzzjonijiet ġewwa pajjiżna jaħdmu.
The Muscat government celebrated the arrests, but for Daphne's loved ones, it wasn't enough.
It was like the police had arrested the bomb, because the hitmen were just tools, really. We were worried that there's a political murder, arrest the hitman, case closed.
But the police didn't stop. Like Daphne, they chased the money, linking payments to the hitmen back to the alleged mastermind of the entire plot.
This journalist woke me up, it must have been at about 5 a.m. and he was shouting, "Wake up, wake up!" They arrested Jürgen Fenech. And after that, everything changed.
Jürgen Fenech, head of the electrogas monopoly and close friend of the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, was arrested trying to flee Malta on his yacht. He was charged with conspiring to murder Daphne.
Every time we turn on a light, we use the microwave, we boil a kettle of water. We're funneling money to the person accused of my mother's murder.
Shockingly, Fenech was released on bail, but he'd reportedly rolled over on some of Malta's top political figures. Fenech became the biggest story in the country, his revelations unleashing political and social chaos.
For the people behind my mother's murder, that arrest triggered the collapse of a house of cards.
Arrested for conspiring to murder journalist Daphne Caruana Galizia, businessman Jürgen Fenech was about to unleash chaos.
We have never seen anything like that. It really did trigger the most turbulence in Malta in 2-3 generations easily.
While in custody, Jürgen Fenech first alleged a previous failed attempt to assassinate Daphne.
Then he tried to implicate the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, Kembry.
We know from court testimony that the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff was passing on information about the investigation to the man who is now accused of murder.
Kembry strenuously denied the allegations, but quickly resigned, as did Konrad Mitzi, the other minister with ties to Fenech. With the Prime Minister's right-hand men allegedly part of the murder plot, protesters took to the streets demanding Muscat's resignation. With the Maltese government facing a constitutional and political crisis, the EU quickly condemned the whole saga.
We will make sure that justice is done and the truth will come to light.
The Muscat government was hanging by a thread.
What kind of pressure was building on Joseph Muscat at that point?
It became simply impossible for Muscat to hold on to power.
The pressure was so intense that what we thought was impossible actually happened.
Dakinhar jingħażel mexxej ġdid tal-Partit Laburista, jien mbagħad nirreżenja minn mexxej u nagħti f'idejn il-persuna magħżula u fil-jiem ta' wara nirreżenja minn Prim Ministru biex ikollna Prim Ministru ġdid.
Facing the electrogas scandal and claims he'd helped his friends cover up a murder, Joseph Muscat finally stepped down.
It was a huge moment. This is why he really did not want the investigation into my mother's murder to come to its logical conclusion, because he knew that it would cause irreparable harm to his own ambitions. Joseph Muscat, he set out to deceive the people of Malta, but after that point there was no going back for him. The sort of spell had been broken.
But despite the allegations, Muscat has not been charged in connection with the energy deal or Daphne's murder.
What questions now do you think Joseph Muscat still needs to answer to the Maltese public and to your family?
He needs to answer the question of what he knew about my mother's murder and from which point. But I think he also needs to come clean about his role in the corrupt deals that led to my mother's murder. The only way he can get any kind of redemption is by coming clean. This is what he has to do.
In death, Daphne brought down a political empire. But 4 years after the killing, the case isn't closed. The alleged mastermind Haagen is still awaiting trial, along with 2 of the alleged hitmen.
The politicians in power when she was killed, they've all resigned and faded from public view. Now, the task remains for her family and for activists to keep her memory alive and to push for accountability.
I think we'll stick with poinsettias. At this time of year, they look beautiful. They're so lovely.
Anne and her friends have a simple job, which they believe will one day save the country.
We have been taking care of the memorial for 4 years. We use it to remind the country and the world that justice has still not been served. And we make it beautiful because Daphne was a person who loved beauty.
Good evening, my friends, and thank you for being here.
The memorial stands opposite Malta's law courts. On the 16th of every month, Daphne's supporters gather here to continue her fight.
We will keep working so that the sacrifice of her death will not be in vain.
Their lobbying led to a public inquiry which last year ruled that the Maltese state was responsible for Daphne's murder.
The final report is several hundred pages long. It documents all the horror. They very clearly state that Malta was accelerating towards becoming a mafia state, and that was only stopped by Daphne's murder and the backlash that it provoked.
The report made recommendations on how to clean up corruption in government, but it's been largely ignored by the new Maltese parliament.
So we have another fight on our hands for those recommendations to be implemented. Otherwise, we're back in a situation where journalists are working in an unsafe environment.
Any change will come too late for Daphne, but may save the next generation of journalists.
Daphne used to say the truth. Without her, we almost knew nothing, so it's important to know what will happen when I am older.
When I was Beatrice's age, I'd come to visit family in Malta. Unlike her, though, I got to grow up in Australia, where press freedoms are increasingly under attack, but journalists don't pay for the truth with their lives. Not yet, anyway.
Governments all over the world are targeting journalists in the same way the government in Malta targeted my mother. When you see a journalist being attacked, it's a sign that something is very badly wrong with our societies. We need to do something to stop it.
Daphne believed that the pen was mightier than the sword. I hope Malta can one day show the world that the old saying is still true.